Well, welcome everyone to the Wake Up Call. Today is Tuesday, July 2nd. We are sailing right here into July with our book, 100 Ways to Motivate Yourself and Change Your Life Forever by Steve Chandler. And we are on chapter number 33, which we love the number 33 here at the Yount household because that's Jamie's basketball number. So we love 33. And we love this chapter, which is called Turn into a Word Processor. So let's read this up, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jamie to get his take on it. Turn into a word processor. If you associate the word willpower with negative things such as harsh self-denial and punishment, you will weaken your resolve to build it. To increase your resolve, it's often useful to think of new word associations. To weightlifters, failure is success. Unless they lift a weight to the point of failure, their muscles aren't growing. So they have programmed themselves through repetition to use the word failure in a positive sense. They also call what we would call pain something positive, the burn. Getting to the burn is the goal. You'll hear bodybuilders call out to each other, roast them. By consciously using motivated language, they acquire access to inner power through the use of the human will. Zen philosopher and scholar Alan Watts also used to hate the word discipline because it had so many negative connotations. Yet he knew that the key to enjoying any activity was in the discipline, so he would substitute the word skill for discipline, and when he did, he was able to develop his own self-discipline. Language leads to power, so be conscious of the creative potential of the language you use and guide it in the direction of more personal power. So, goodness, that was a short chapter this morning. So I'm going to turn it over here to Jamie to see what he has to say about this.
I love it, and that's my kind of chapter because it's short, not because it just talks about weightlifting, but man, so many things, that are pretty obvious. I think when I always try to relate stuff back to sports or things, but I think first and foremost, it's something I learned not just from lifting, but also I learned it from Holli, and she's always, I've heard her say it on her devotionals, and she's said it over and over. Talk to yourself, or you'll talk to yourself, right? And that's how the enemy can creep in, right? He just needs a crack to get in, and then he can, I think that the enemy, many times people misunderstand. He just wants you to think differently. And if he can just get in and get you to think a little bit differently, it then affects the results that you have in life. And so it's just a really readily available kind of example when you talk about weightlifting. And I've never said roast them, so maybe I'll do that with the boys today, see if they just, I've never said that. So that's a new one for me. But I think there's a lot of things, right, when you talk about kind of, weightlifting in life and all of that. You strive to add a little more weight so you can grow. But then it's just about a positive thing. It's something I always teach to boys, right, is when we come out to the gym, right, there's only two things you got to bring is a good attitude and work hard. And you can't do your best if you have a bad attitude. And if you are speaking negatively, obviously that's going to affect your performance because that's really what it's all about. So, there's so many things about that and so many examples, but we always try to speak positive, right? When you think about it, just yesterday I did a pretty, aggressive workout, and I was heading out to do the workout, and James was kind of giving me a hard time because he'd already done it, so he was happy and excited. He was relaxing in the pool. I was headed out there, but as I was out there, I was just in my mind, I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to be really difficult. And Holli just sent me a message, and it said, hey, you've got this. And so I remember just consciously reading it out loud to myself for that very reason, and then just kind of clinging to that through the workout. And I didn't tell her that, but it was just this, because you have to kind of talk to yourself and be positive. And so there's so many things about that, right? You always teach the boys, they kind of give me a hard time because every time I'm kind of lifting a big lift, I'll say lightweight and kind of scream at the weight a little bit. But it's just to set your mind in a positive direction, right? Because as soon as, you think, right, in weightlifting, as soon as you think it's heavy, right, then it becomes actually even more heavy, right? The weight doesn't affect, right, and it doesn't change. It doesn't go from, 100 pounds to 105 pounds or drop from 100 pounds to 95 pounds. But the mind is such a powerful thing that it can, when you tell it what to do and you set the tone, if you've ever heard, if you think you can, you're right, or if you think you can't, you're right. And so it all starts with your thinking. But then many times you may want to verbalize, well, this is, bad, or this is whatever, but it's just a conscious effort to try to speak life and use that in your advantage. And that applies to everything in life. It's so much easier said than done, right? It's so much easier said than done in life. But in kind of the example used in bodybuilding or working out, it's probably an easier thing to kind of say those things. But also it's something that, we always try to, it talked about failure, and failure is a part of success, but we always try to end on a positive, right? We always try to, there's so much psychology behind it, but end on a positive. But that's no different than kind of ending your day on a positive, right? We come together as a family, and always just a big family hug, and, a prayer for the night, and just, what we're thankful for the day. But there's so much about the what you speak is what you prophesize, and it's such a great example. And not to hang out around the bodybuilding and the weightlifting, but if you take those things and you think about it in life, right? If you're going into maybe a difficult situation, right, with we have two boys, and so every once in a while they get crazy. And so if you go into it thinking like, oh, this is going to be bad, and you set the tone with your attitude, or you can go into it with, it's going to be a chance to grow together and learn and kind of whatever, it changes everything. And it really, no matter what it is in your life, right, if you're going into something, just like yesterday, I was going into this really difficult workout, but just kind of speaking those words helps to get you through that. It doesn't make it, really the process any different. But if you start to kind of speak negatively, it affects your attitude, and then it affects your performance, right? You can't give your best without a good attitude. And so there's so much about it. It's like a psychology thing. I love it. I love, that's what we work with the boys together in life stuff, and the, working out. And the working out just applies to life, right? It's easier to see it and process there. And it's a lot tougher to apply it in life. But once you learn those skills, then it definitely does make things better. But I go back to really just something that I would say, just to simply blanket statement, this whole, short chapter is what Holli always says: talk to yourself, or you're talk to yourself. So you have a choice today, whatever you're going through, talk to yourself, or 100% you are going to talk to yourself.
Well, I love that, Mr. Yount, and it is so true. Talk to yourself, or you will talk to yourself. And I love what he says here in this chapter. He says, language leads to power. And that makes me think of the scripture verse, life or death is in the power of your tongue, right? And so basically, what you are speaking is either going to set you on a course to be uplifted, full of life and light, and able to move through your day, or what you're speaking is going to be on the death side, dreary, down, depressing, defeated, frustrated, aggravated. And it's just so true if you just think of how you go throughout your day and you talk to you more than anybody talks to you. I want you to think about that for a second. It sounds funny. Sounds like it might be a riddle, but it's not. It's the truth. You will talk to yourself more than anybody else will talk to you throughout the day. Now, you might have a young kid that talks 24/7, but even then, you will still talk to yourself more than they will talk to you. And so you got to ask yourself, what are you telling yourself? What is that inner voice talk? Are you saying, well, I'm stupid. I can't do this. I'm not good enough. I'll never be able to accomplish this, and I'm not feeling well, and I'm sad, and now it doesn't mean you're not going to have those feelings, but if you're just constantly berating yourself and beating yourself up is what you're doing. You might as well just stand in front of a mirror and punch yourself in the face 1,000 times, because that is exactly what you're doing mentally to yourself. And if you really think about it, if you're going throughout your day and you're just mentally beating yourself up, well, guess what? You're not going to have a good attitude. You're not going to have good energy. You're not going to have any energy. You're going to be exhausted because you've just been physically beating yourself up, but you're doing it in a mental way. So sometimes I always say this too. I say you got to check yourself before you wreck yourself, because if you keep going down this train of thought, and you just keep beating yourself up over and over and over, I'm not a good friend, I'm not a good business leader, I'm not a good partner, I'm not a good mom, I'm not a good dad, I'm not a good son, I'm not a good daughter, I'm not, blah, 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 blah. You know, just a bunch of hippy-dippy baloney that you're just constantly telling yourself, oh, my goodness, you're not going to have a very good day. You're definitely not going to have a good week, a good month, a good year, a good life, if you keep going down this train of thought. And so we have to turn our words into a more positive speaking. You know, Jamie and I were believers, so we love to use scripture. And one of my favorite scripture verses is, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And that scripture verse I have repeated to myself more than any other thing I've ever told myself over and 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 over again. And it gets me back on the right track. And not just being able to speak words positively and life-giving to yourself. It has to start there. But then you can also start to focus on others and lift them up and give them life-giving words and encouraging them. But it's almost ludicrous to think that you can encourage others when you cannot encourage yourself. So it has to start with you. Because your attitude does not just affect you. It affects everyone around you. It's like a force field of energy surrounding you. If you think about the cartoon comic strip, The Peanuts, right, with Charlie Brown, there is a Pigpen, and he's got this dark, dusty cloud everywhere he goes. I mean, it's because he's dirty. He's not taking a bath, right? But it follows him everywhere he goes. And that's like your attitude. A stinky attitude will follow you everywhere. And you know what? The sad thing is sometimes you can't even smell it because you're just so used to it. But, man, others can. And if you find yourself, going somewhere and, man, other people are turning the other way or they don't want to be around you, has nothing to do with how you look. It has to do with your attitude, what's on the inside of you. So turn yourself into a word processor. Language leads to power, and start to really think on these things. If you're having a bad day, or you just seem like, why does all this bad stuff keep happening to me? And maybe it has something to do with your perspective and the language that you're using to yourself. I'm telling you, it can start there, and you can. This doesn't take practice. You can change it right now, today. As soon as we get off this phone, you can start filling your mind with life-giving words and energy and scripture, and it will change your life. It will completely change your life, and I want to encourage you to do that today. So turn it over to Jamie, and he can unmute the lines, and we can say goodbye. We want to just say happy 4th of July to everyone, because we are celebrating that this weekend, and we appreciate you all. So, Jamie, let's unmute.
All right. Let's see if we can get this to work.
Goodbye.
All right, we love you all. Good job.
Nope.